Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris. I know my own name. Ha ha!
Good work.
Yeah, comedian, filmmaker, Johnny Asshole Pants.
That sounds like the name of a character in a script we would have written when we were in high school.
Also, it's just 3 words put together, much like this film today, Gleaming the Cube.
Yes, we are talking in this season about the films of 1989, and this episode is about the future cult classic and nonsense word combination, Gleaming the Cube, starring Christian Slater as a skateboarder / murder solver.
Yeah. I bet you could sell that on TV right now. He's a skateboarding detective who ollies his way into solving mysteries.
It sounds like something that might have been featured on the station in our last episode, UHF.
I would probably watch that show.
Would you? Yeah. I wonder if like that feels like more like the kind of thing that would have been on the air in 1989. Now, like everything is gritty and serialized, and you couldn't have just like wacky skateboarding crime solving in every episode.
Okay, but at the same time, when I think of Christian Slater right now, he's like Mr. Robot, right? But he's not really Mr. Robot because Mr. Robot is a figment of Rami Malek's imagination, or who's his dead dad.
Spoilers for Mr. Robot.
The point is, what he's doing now is no more ridiculous.
Are you saying that Mr. Robot is equally ridiculous to Gleaming the Cube?
That is exactly what I'm saying.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Take that, Sam Esmail.
Yeah. I was thought you were going to say that Christian Slater, as he is now, should star as the skateboarding detective.
I'm with that too. I'm like all for that.
Okay. So Gleaming the Cube, as we just have indicated, was a movie about the hot skateboarding culture of 1989, which was, I mean, this is very much one of those movies where someone in Hollywood was like, what are kids doing now? Yeah. Let's make a movie about it.
This is definitely the second wave of, and the height of skateboarding culture. 70s, we know Dogtown and the Z-Boys, right?
Yeah.
And then this was the Bones Brigade era with Peralta Powell and Tony Hawk just taking over the world.
Tony Hawk taking over this movie at times as well.
Yeah.
But despite that, this movie was not successful at the box office. It made $2.8 million on its $10 million budget and definitely did not capture the zeitgeist in the way that I'm sure the studio hoped it would.
Well, again, though, and I think this is one of the themes of the season, is that this is at the home video boom. And this is why it's a cult classic, because it became so popular on cable and with VHS tapes and everything. So it did its job. Sometimes you just got to let it burn, baby.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if financially it was satisfactory for the backers of the movie at any point.
I will bet you they made, between international rights and all the cable and VHS stuff, I'll bet you they made their money.
They probably made, I would believe that. But I think for a movie that's clearly designed to be like a pop culture phenomenon and take advantage of some hot trend, I think they would have been disappointed with how it turned out.
Yeah, sure, but we've seen plenty of failures of that.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, enough failures of that you kind of wonder why studios even still bother doing it.
And you could have said that about this movie, because 1986's Thrashin', I don't think also was a huge hit.
I have not seen that. There's another 80s movie, I think, called Rad, just Rad.
Yeah.
That people often mention in connection with this. I haven't seen either.
And I will watch all of them.
Yeah.
And I'll watch all skate movies. I love them. As you know skating. This. And I love skate documentaries. Yeah. I do. And I have no ability to skate.
I was just gonna say, like, well, even in 1989, did you ever try?
I did try it. I wasn't very good, clearly, but like it's not like, like I used to play basketball and I'll watch basketball movies and be like, oh, that's awesome. I could see how that. This is just like totally out of my world.
Yeah, for me too. I mean, I remember having a friend at the time who owned a skateboard. I don't know if he was really necessarily a skater, but it was like, oh, this is a thing. And so he got one. And I think I tried it once or twice and it didn't work out.
That's probably what happened to me. Is like you try all that stuff and it's like, oh, this is a cool thing. And, but definitely not good at it.
No,
Josh.
It was not. Dave, did you ever skateboard?
No, I can't even roller skate or anything.
Oh, I can't either. Definitely not. Skateboarding, I feel like I could better handle because at least there's a board to stand on.
Yeah, and and it would have been a good idea. I should have reached out to him for this episode. Do you guys know who Justin Bishop is in
I,
Las Vegas?
is he a big skateboarder here?
He's a huge skateboarder and he's blind and he's like doing all these things with technology to kind of reteach himself how to skate, and he's sponsored, he's getting a huge following, and again, my mistake for not reaching out. That would have been a good guess, but you guys look up Justin Bishop online. Very good dude and a cool skateboarding story to follow.
Yeah, I mean, in skateboarding, still obviously this was the height of it as a kind of fad, but it's still a huge deal. I mean, it's not like skateboarding disappeared, certainly. So even though there weren't a ton of people who saw the movie at the time, it was well received by audiences. It got an A- from CinemaScore, the audience polling service, which is a solid result from the people who went to see it. Critic-wise, it did not do as well. Critics were not into this, and most of the reviews that I found, which is always funny with this, definitely had an undertone of like, what are the kids doing kind of thing. And you can see how they're maybe critics are a little out of touch. Richard Harrington in the Washington Post said, Gleaming the Cube is a slight skateboard thriller that looks more like one of those after-school specials on television than a bona fide feature film. It centers on teens gathered together in their subculture, skateboarding here, but it could just as well be surfing, dirt biking, dune buggying, or thrash metal, and gives it a little mystery twist. The plot, once uncovered, seems rather odd and convoluted, but maybe that's what director Graeme Clifford needed to justify the various skateboard chases. And while Clifford probably thinks Gleaming the Cube is about familial confusions or Vietnamese refugee culture, it's really about chases and the ever-lengthening gaps in Hollywood between fantasy and reality. Incidentally, the chases are pretty good, particularly the ones through a subdivision and out on a freeway. Ridiculous, but good. And I kind of agree that that was the only good thing about this movie.
And who shot those?
Stacey Peralta.
Second unit director Stacey Peralta, who you would want to be shooting who's the greatest of all skate video filmmakers.
Yes.
And director of Dogtown and Z-Boys, among others.
Right.
So,
yeah. And was also the like skating consultant on this movie.
As he should be.
Yes.
And an original Z-Boy. So
yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although I don't like this. It could have been, you could say that about any movie. Like, well, if Side Out wasn't about volleyball, it could have been about ice hockey. Like, okay, but it wasn't. What's your point, bro?
Right.
I like the widening gap between fantasy and reality or something like that. How many movies are like that? Like, that's totally normal.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I think maybe he's saying that the reality of skating that is the reason that this movie was made, and the fantasy of what we see in the movie is completely like there's no connection.
We all agree the best part of those skating montages.
Yeah, and there just aren't enough of them. There's a lot more plot than there is skating in this movie.
And there could have been less plot. And also, when in our last episode on UHF, I think I was making the point that I think the plot held together. This is a much more difficult plot to follow.
Yeah, as he points out, the plot gets really convoluted and in a really unnecessary way.
Very early on, too.
Yes. So Janet Maslin in the New York Times said, she's talking about Brian, the character played by Christian Slater. Brian's idea of blowing off steam is executing high-speed flip-flops on his skateboard.
Yeah.
And he does this on the kind of U-shaped concrete spaces that almost guarantee he will land on his head. Miraculously, the film's skateboard showmanship comes off without a hitch. As Brian, Mr. Slater first appears looking sullen and rebellious, wearing a remarkable hairdo achieved with mousse, bleach, and perhaps electricity. As the story progresses, though, Brian literally and figuratively cleans up his act. He becomes a cleaner-cut, more responsible fellow as he searches for his brother's killer. Though this isn't a great role, Mr. Slater manages to seem confident and alert throughout. And I love that her greatest praise is that Christian Slater is in fact not asleep. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's busy on the skateboard doing whirly birds and zip zaps.
Yes.
So how can you? And she's never seen spiked hair before at this point in time.
Yeah. Like I said, these stodgy critics were not in touch with the teen skateboarding culture.
Janet Maslin doesn't seem to have been in touch with anything in this review,
Yeah. Hair.
Yeah. And I don't think she understood why he cleaned up his image in the film which was to advance his cause to solve his brother's murder.
Right. Well, she does say that as he searches for his brother's killer.
No, but she says as he does it, not to advance his cause to do it.
Right. Yeah, there is a clear reason for him to do that. So finally, Kevin Thomas in the LA Times said, "There's a genuine attempt in Gleaming the Cube to deal with the impact the loss of a brother has upon a likable, footloose teenager. Unfortunately, the conventions of the action-adventure / youth flick genres prevail. The result is an exploitation picture with a little something extra. Lots of awesome skateboard wizardry, culminating in a speed of lightning chase sequence in which skateboards are pitted against cars. The film is geared ruthlessly to teen audiences. In fact, how many people beyond their teens know that its title refers to that exalted state a skateboarder attains at the top of his form?"
I don't think even teenagers knew what that
Yeah,
meant.
I think you're right. Definitely no one knew.
Right. Yeah, look, his adopted Vietnamese brother gets murdered. It would have been just so much easier to be like, hey, why don't we make one of the skate gang get murdered and the rest of the skaters like have to avenge their buddy, You could have cut out so much of the crap.
I mean, you could also make a movie in which no one gets murdered.
Right. You could. And then it was, again, we could go back to like, we have to skate to save the park.
Right.
That would have been fine.
And because like the reason that they make the movie about skating culture is because it's like a thing that teens do that's misunderstood. You'd think the plot would hinge on that. And it's really not about that.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm happy that you agree that more skating would have done this movie well.
Yeah, absolutely. So had you ever seen this before?
No, and it's incredibly difficult to find, as we found out.
It is. And weirdly, though, with the current bizarre landscape of streaming, it was incredibly easy to find.
Like 3 days before we tried to watch
until it was impossible to find.
Yeah.
Because it was streaming in various places, and as of this recording, at least, it is no longer. And DVD releases are out of print or foreign, and you can find VHS copies on eBay and whatnot, but they're not cheap. So yeah, this is a movie. I mean, I feel like part of movies building cult following sometimes is that they're hard to find. And so the people who find them like have this sense of discovery.
Especially back in the tape trading days. And what about you? Had you seen it?
I had never seen it. I had a vague awareness of it, partly because of the silly title.
Well, yeah, it's such a pop cultural, I could totally see myself looking at it like a skater dude in the audience, be like, you go Gleaming the Cube today or whatnot, hopefully funnier than that. But have you seen it?
I hadn't even heard of it. And you guys say it's a cult classic, but I had never heard of this movie.
So then you clearly watched it because you were preparing for this episode.
Am I supposed to do that?
No. Hey man, he watched UHF for like
Which
the
was
87th time.
It was his pick.
I feel like he may have watched at least 3 movies this season. So we're getting better.
Or are we getting worse, Josh?
No, it's definitely better.
Okay.
Yeah. I did not know anything other than that it was the Christian Slater skateboarding movie, and that was all I knew about it. But we learned so much more.
Greetings and salutations.
Yeah, we talked about Christian Slater in Heathers a few episodes ago, and I still like in my mind was kind of envisioning him as JD from Heathers, even though this is a very, very different character.
Right. What a year. It's like one role could shoot you up the ladder and the other could destroy your career.
Yeah. Although, I mean, Heathers too was not a success when it came out. I mean, both of those movies have become cult figures later on. Heathers certainly with a lot more regard for its quality, but still neither one was a big hit.
And as Janet Maslin might be aware, Christian Slater also awake in Heathers.
Yes. I would venture to say Christian Slater awake in every movie he's made.
But I haven't watched the entire filmography of Christian Slater, so I can't confirm that. But I think it's you're a well-respected film critic.
Oh, thank you.
It's probably worth taking your word on that for.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say maybe I should embark on a long-term project, Christian Slater, alert or not, in every movie.
Yeah. And then that's it. It's instead of an essay, you just put the title of the movie and then Christian Slater, and underneath there's on one side it says alert, and on the other side it says not, and you just circle the answer.
Yeah, that definitely would be less work, but involve a lot of movie watching. Do you have any other? I didn't find a lot of other statistics or numbers on how this movie did. It did not win any awards.
What a bummer.
Yeah,
Do
there
you want
were-
to know how the term came about?
there was an article somewhere. Was it in Thrasher or one of those skating magazines?
1983.
Yeah, but even then, I feel like that's probably some random thing that some stoned skater like tossed off and then forgot about.
Yeah, he could have just as easily said, "Have you ever haunched the pony?" Or,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever it was.
Yeah, and some studio executive had that magazine on his desk and like that. Oh, this is a thing that the
Gleaming
kids
inside
say.
the Cube,
Yeah, Gleaming the Cube. That's the title of our movie.
Yeah. Have you ever snorted the pixies?
Right.
I have one little thing to add to the conversation.
Okay.
And that is that I saw that an alternate title for it was Skate or Die.
Yes.
Which the year before was the name of one of the best skating video games ever on Nintendo Entertainment
Oh, I
System.
remember that video game actually.
I wonder if that had anything to do with the change of the title.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
might have. That's certainly a more like accurate title. And I feel like that would be just as, I mean, enticing to some movie audience in a theater in 1989. But
yeah, Skater Dies like right now. I would like that title. There was another title. I think it was called like A Brother's Revenge or something.
yeah, yeah, which that's a boring title.
Yeah,
But
no,
but
that's
but
good.
Gleaming the Cube is what we got.
Gleaming the Cube,
Including, and right, if it was Skate or Die, we wouldn't have had that awesome theme song that opens the movie.
Skate or Die.
Not as good. See,
No.
not as good.
No.
All right. Well, we'll come back and talk about our general thoughts on Gleaming the Cube. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1989, we're talking about cult classic
Gleaming the Cube.
That, yes. This is a very bad movie.
It's not so good.
No, it's really not. I feel like this is one of those movies that is better if you like imagine it in your mind than if you actually watch it. Like Dave, having not seen it, had a better experience of it than you and I did.
Yeah, it's not the best.
As we kind of were talking a little earlier, the plot here, Christian Slater, Brian, he's a skater boy and has got his gang of skater friends, kind of a burnout loser.
Yeah. Yeah. But can we just say,
Yeah.
in this gang of skater friends is the greatest skater of all time. And what do they have him do in the movie?
He delivers pizzas.
Drive a pizza truck. So you have Tony Hawk and you say, Tony, why don't you sit out the skating and we'll let the other fellas take care of it?
I mean, he does skate at certain points, but yes, his character is a pizza delivery guy who has the great Pizza Hut, the like red truck with the actual like Pizza Hut roof on it, which is kind of awesome. I don't know why they don't have those
also
anymore.
in his room, he's got multiple landlines and he's a teenager. It's very strange.
Yeah, that was just like some weird, like wacky detail that doesn't come off.
Yeah.
But mainly we're following Brian, who has his adopted brother, Vin or Vinny, who's Vietnamese that has been adopted by his parents. And Vin is the good brother. He does well in school while Brian is burnout. And Vin is also involved in some sort of black market-y aid delivery to the Vietnamese anti-communist rebels.
He discovers it. He's not involved.
Well,
in
at first he's involved in the more legit part of it, where they're sending like medical supplies to these Vietnamese freedom fighters.
Vin's not a bad guy. Vin discovers all these bad things about
Right.
his girlfriend's father, who I thought just ran a video store, but
Right, but he
apparently
runs a video store and he sends legitimate like supplies,
weapons.
But then he also sends like the legitimate shipments are a cover for sending weapons.
So Vin discovers that and becomes collateral damage, even though the girlfriend's dad doesn't want him killed. The guy, the henchman, accidentally kills him.
Yeah, with a wet t-shirt.
Yeah. Also, there's a line in there that, like, if you want to talk about exposition, where he's like, Vin and Brian are in the room together, like having a little argument, and Vin's like, "You're still angry because they adopted me," and Brian's like, "That was 11 years ago."
Yeah,
like,
let me calculate that right now.
yeah, but like, I mean, dude, like, Vin, chill the f out, bro. I don't think he's angry at you about that anymore.
No, I mean, and part of the plot of the movie is that while he seems sort of resentful of Vin at first, when Vin gets murdered, he really like discovers his love for his brother and decides that he needs to solve this murder, especially because the cops are calling it a suicide. And Brian's parents, who are barely characters in the movie, don't really seem to care that much that their son is dead.
I don't think it's that. I just think that the writers didn't write them any parts for them to care.
Right. Well, that's
You
what, but it comes across as if they don't have any involvement.
When we were watching it, I thought like there was a point where I was like, I hope every scene the mom walks in and just drops something and breaks it. Like she's so surprised at like, Brian's new haircut or something. She's like, what?
That was basically her entire part.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the dad was, I'm a businessman. I don't have time for this. But I'm hurting.
Yeah. He has that one scene where he's sitting alone in the kitchen watching home movies of Brian and Vin. In the home movie, the dad is yelling at Brian. Right. And this is the like sentimental thing that he watches to remember his son.
Remember when Vin was here and you were just a piece of shit?
And I like to scream at you about Frisbee.
Yeah, because you suck at life, Brian. Why couldn't it have been you who was murdered, my biological son?
Yeah, it's misguided. So
Gleaming the Cube.
It does have that though. So Brian enlists the help of his skater friends, as well as the detective played by Stephen Bauer from Scarface.
Woohoo, Stephen Bauer.
Who is the only person who gives Brian the time of day because he's like a cool detective. He used to be a burnout himself, but then he shaped up.
Brian, I used to make mistakes. I know what it's like to be a teenager.
Yeah.
I relate to you.
I'm a cop, but I wear t-shirts.
Brian, you think this is uniform coat? I'm in jeans right now, Brian. Okay? We're doing the same.
And so he kind of tries to help Brian, and Brian has to discover the secret weapons deal in this warehouse run by
George Costanza's
right,
boss.
George Costanza's boss. Richard Herd is the name of the actor who plays Lawndale, the white guy, who is in cahoots with Vin's boss from the video store, the Colonel, who spends all his time wearing Los Angeles Rams gear, which is one of the most absurd, hilarious details in this movie.
He's acclimating to his city and showing pride in his sports team. And
that's true.
Costanza's boss, speaking of sports, was his boss from the Yankees, who gave him the instruction to listen to the song Downtown to find out how to do his project. And then actually torpedoed his own job so he could go work for the Mets instead of George Costanza.
All not relevant to Gleaming the Cube.
Is anything relevant to Gleaming the Cube?
I haven't understood a thing you two said this whole time. So.
I was trying to explain the plot, but the plot is so complicated for no reason.
It's a real Johnny Asshole Pants.
Yeah, it really is. And you notice that I have not really mentioned skating in this at all.
But getting back to the plot, Josh.
Well, please, let's.
You left out a key element, which is that Brian, to solve this mystery, decides he will swoop in on his dead brother's girlfriend to pick up information. Of course, they both kind of fall for each other.
But he's really using her in kind of a crappy way.
It seems very nefarious indeed.
He pretends to want to date her so that he can snoop in her dad's office and steal his Rams hat so he can plant it at the scene of an explosion and frame the dad in a whole development that I did not understand at all.
He also stole the lighter, which I was guessing was supposed to play into the explosion, but he didn't leave it there. And then it was just for the girlfriend to discover.
Right.
And she's like, why'd you steal this? And he's like, well, your dad is running a guerrilla operation, importing and exporting weapons. And also he murdered my brother. Which he never really says all that, but he just says like, you're not going to like what I have to tell you.
Well, we assume because we've watched the pod. But the best is before he tells her the truth, she says, why do you have this lighter? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I got it at a thrift store or something. Mm-hmm. And she's like, no, it's engraved with my dad's name. Like, how did he think
Colonel gave it to him?
That lie was going to work?
Brian, what kind of line is that, man? You just got to tell the truth to the girls, man. That's all they want to hear. Listen, I like girls too, Brian.
And ultimately, you think that the central kind of bonding in this movie would be between Brian and the girlfriend, but it turns out to be between Brian and Detective Stephen Bauer. That's how the movie ends with their like mentor relationship.
You got to make some changes, right, Brian? Make some adjustments.
So there is skating in the movie, though.
There is some skating and some really good skating.
There is some really good skating. And as we were saying before, there should have been way more skating.
There was, look, why are you going to have a cube if you're not going to gleam it?
So true. So true.
There should have been more skating. Also, one of the friends, Yabo,
Yabo, played by Max Perlich, who went on to be a character actor,
yeah.
still working a lot.
Yeah, he has his own bunker.
The bunker was great. All of a sudden, they're climbing underground into this bunker where he skates.
Right, but it's not like he has a bunker because, like, oh, he's a survivalist or he has nowhere else to live. His bunker's on his family's property. Like, they're all having dinner, mom and dad and the sister.
Mom played by Rita Rudner.
It was Rita Rudner,
Yeah.
huh? So
Yes.
they're all hanging out, and then Brian comes over and he's like, yeah, let's go talk in my bunker. And they just go underground, like right by the pool or something.
And that's like where he lives, in this bunker. And I was kind of imagining like maybe his family, because he seems like his family is maybe a little wealthy, and maybe they built this as a bomb shelter or something. And then their dirtbag teenage son was like, no, mom, I'm going to go live in the bunker.
See, and I just thought it was like whatever from like communist scare of the 50s and 60s. And wherever they bought the house, it already had a bunker. And but it got to the same conclusion where he's like, a bunker, it's mine now. Skating.
I think we needed more bunker backstory for Yabo. Was that his name? Yabo?
Yeah. And he was the one who said, like, who explained what Gleaming the Cube is in a completely random throwaway piece of exposition.
I think he tells Brian, he's like, man, you've really been gleaming the cube or something like that.
I think he says it's not
or that he wants to be gleaming the cube.
Right, because he's so sad with what he
needs to
go gleam the cube.
Yeah.
You know, what does that mean? It's like, it's when you skate and you're just in the zone and there's nothing else around you. You're gleaming the cube. And then he goes and skates under like a boardwalk or something.
Right. Yeah, that's true. To like kind of clear his head or whatever.
Yeah.
And those skate scenes are good. Like the best parts in this movie are, as I think one of those reviews mentioned, the kind of skate chases through the suburban streets. Or, I mean, the finale is so over the top that I don't know if that's best, where the skaters are like chasing after cars and they're on the freeway.
It's great.
I don't think great is the word that I would use for
but
it.
it's what it should be.
I suppose.
Executed for it.
And at least if you're going to have a skate movie, like it's skating. And of course, the way that Brian finally defeats George Costanza's boss, who's holding a gun to the head of the girl, is that Brian like jumps on his skateboard off some ramp or something and knocks the guy in the head with his skateboard.
A highway ramp.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
They whip him. And then he does it. Tony Hawk's never done that. So
yeah, Brian Kelly, greatest skateboarder of all time.
Yeah, if that was like in the X Games, can you eliminate a villain with only a skateboard jump? He'd be an X Games gold medalist.
They should really add that. I feel like cube gleaming should be a new category in the X Games, right?
That would be so amazing. Like, even if they just did it as a joke, like I would totally watch that.
Yes, I would too. So as we said, but I mean, there's a lot of like great skateboarders who were involved in making this movie. Stacy Peralta as the second unit director and the skating consultant, and a whole list of some of those Z boys.
Tommy Guerrero,
who's
like Brian's personal coach, and then you had some of the other Bones Brigade guys, Mike McGill, Rodney Mullen as the kind of stunt doubles. So, but yeah, they were the most professional part of the film, probably. So.
Yes, they were, and there definitely should have been more of those guys, because I mean, and this is a movie where like during the closing credits, they're just like, here's some more skateboarding. And it's like, that, why wasn't that in the movie?
Yeah, that should have been in the movie. Okay. The one skateboarder that I also wanted to mention, and I told you, like, I love watching these skate documentaries. There's this cool stunt in that big climax where Brian skates under a semi truck that's on the highway that's driving.
Right. Yes.
Pretty dangerous stunt.
Brian, come on, man.
Yeah. So that
have some care for your health.
That was done by Gator Mark Rogowski. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, I've seen the documentary about him.
Yeah, Stoke, the Rise and Fall of Gator.
Yeah.
You know about this guy?
Mm-mm.
He was a professional skater who got mixed up with drugs and alcohol, and then beat, raped, and murdered a woman, and he's in jail. As long as at least 25-year sentence, probably longer. And I think they're going to parole him this year, which is a little
just in time to star in Gleaming the Cube too.
But I mean, that's a good movie, a very horrible story.
Yeah.
But Stoked is a good skate documentary.
Right. Yeah.
And like, man, what a fall from cube gleaming.
It is. You got to be careful when you gleam the cube because it could turn out poorly for you.
keep chasing that next gleam, and you never know where it's going to lead you.
Very good point. I also wanted to mention, this was something that you pointed out when we were watching it, is these covers of Motown songs that show up, and they are sung by Vietnamese pop star Con Ha. And this movie, for all of its ridiculousness and faults, is remarkably respectful about Vietnamese culture.
Yeah, I knew both the songs. There was well now I don't remember, but one was Never Can Say Goodbye, the Jackson 5 cover, and the other was the Supremes cover, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. And they got those specifically from her. And you wouldn't necessarily even know that as you listen to them in the movie, but I looked it up in part because you'd mentioned it. But elsewhere in the movie, like when we have Vin's funeral, and even though he's been adopted by this white family, we have this whole Vietnamese cultural sort of representation there at the funeral. And the movie takes seriously the idea of this Vietnamese. I mean, in its ridiculous context, it takes seriously the idea of this Vietnamese kind of refugee community within Orange County in Southern California.
Yeah, listen, I agree with you. The movie was ahead of its time.
It was in a weird way, kind of ahead of its time. I feel like the default, especially in the 80s, when we had like Chuck Norris and Sylvester Stallone traveling to Vietnam and just murdering everyone there, that was the default representation of Vietnamese people in the movies. So it was kind of progressive in a way.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. I'm trying to give it credit for something.
You are. I'll give you that.
Yeah. What did you think of Christian Slater's acting aside from being
Alert.
alert? Yeah.
I mean, like, it's not as good as Heather's.
Yeah.
He's fine in it, but like it was like, I think, the 80s, there were so many of these like vying to be the next bad boy. Like literally every year there's a crop of them, more so than now. And maybe this was the way to be like, I played this kind of like really, kind of dark, edgy dude over here. And now I can play another kind of skate lord, edgy dude over here. I don't know. He was fine. He was totally fine.
Yeah, he's fine. I mean, Brian is more of maybe he's an edgy skater, but he's like a good guy. I mean, he's definitely the hero of this movie.
Definitely don't understand like halfway through where he just starts like wearing khakis and button.
Well, as you were saying, this is part of his ploy to get with his brother's ex-girlfriend so that he can use her to find information. And because she doesn't want to date a skating dirtbag, he decides to change his look and become a preppy guy. But it is a little sloppy in terms of motivation.
Yeah. I think Christian Slater, when they asked him what it meant, Gleaming the Cube, he said it's pushing your limits to the edge. Which, if you're pushing your limits, where else are you gonna push them?
That makes no sense. That makes as much sense as just saying, well, it's Gleaming the Cube.
Yeah, man. Hunch the pony.
I'm glad you came up. Did you come up with other variations?
Just snarf the pixies.
All right, those are good
I didn't
ones.
really work on them.
No, maybe workshop that for your act or something.
Yes, the Gleaming the Cube joke. It's gonna
go over big.
Closer.
Yeah, it's really going to.
Any of you out there ever have a adopted Vietnamese family member murdered by a anti-communist pack? Ever have to solve that mystery with a bunch of your skateboarding buddies? Maybe go down to a bunker on a property and steal your dead brother's girlfriend. Well, then you're gonna love this joke.
Very relatable. Everything in this movie. I'm out. I don't know what else to say about this.
So do you want to give it based on cubes?
Yeah, cubes. There are no cubes in this movie. Gleamed cubes. How many gleamed cubes out of 5?
Give it 2 gleamed cubes for the skating and the theme song.
The theme song is great. We should mention again how great the theme song is.
Gleaming the Cube.
Just watch the first like 2 minutes of this movie to hear that song and then turn it off. I agree. 2 out of 5 is generous. I think that's the most I can give it. And the skating really is the only thing this movie has going for it. So we'll come back then and talk about the legacy of Gleaming the Cube.
In a world of wonder.
See? That's my feet!
And horror.
The military advised that the flesh-eating pigeons can only be stopped by destroying the brainstem. and that they do not poop.
that makes no sense.
Why did they do that?
One podcast fights the forces of evil.
The new and improved diabolical disintegrating death ray!
Triumphs over adversity.
Now, I'm not sure how to pronounce this word.
And brings hope,
Live your life.
joy, and silliness.
Perfectly normal.
That podcast is Release the
That's painful.
Clowns. Coming to ears near your head now. Release the Clowns sketch comedy podcast on Podbean, iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and all reputable platforms.
Oh, this is most pleasing. Yes, quite marvelous.
Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1989, we've been talking about cult classic Gleaming the Cube. And the legacy, I guess, is that it's a cult. I don't know anyone who actually likes this movie. Or
I found
one
professional
person.
skateboarder Stevie Williams said this influenced him. And
Yeah.
I bet there's a lot of skateboarders who would say the same.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's definitely influential within skating culture. Maybe not for its quality as a film, but just for the way that it represented skating in a mainstream way that didn't happen before this.
And I think the other legacy is just how often it's referenced in pop culture to this day, which is why we chose it as the cult classic. You know, 2 episodes of The Simpsons referenced it. The Lego Batman movie, which was recent, the Goldbergs, and then my 2 favorites are South Park, the episode where Cartman needs to make more mature friends and goes into a man-boy love chat room. The chat room's called Gleaming the Cube, which is somewhat horrible.
I
to think
forgot all
that.
about that. That's where I've heard this name before.
Right. I think that is that, like you're saying, the dumb title of this movie has the legacy so much more than the movie itself, that people know, like, there's this ridiculous movie called Gleaming the Cube, even if they don't know what that is.
Yeah, I knew about it since high school, having never seen it, you know.
Right.
But then in the second season of Robot Chicken, they had Christian Slater guest star as a character called Skater McGee. And the Skater McGee was talking about a trick called the monster cookie pinwheel. And they're like, what's a monster cookie pinwheel? And he says, a monster cookie pinwheel is when you skate up to a locomotive cow catch, you 360 punk buster the second car, do a lemonade handstand onto the third car, a whipping post ollie to the fourth car, a demon stomper on the fifth car, and a Gleaming the Cube off the sixth car before dismounting the train. So I think that's a fun Gleaming the Cube reference.
Yeah. I mean, and there are like legit skateboard tricks that all have stupid names. So in that sense,
I think
fits.
you could, interchange skateboarding moves with dirty sex act names.
Yes.
You know,
You don't
Gleaming
wanna-
the Cube could totally be a sex act.
It could.
you
It
know?
absolutely could.
So, and the Dirty Sanchez could be a skateboarding maneuver.
That is true.
It probably is.
Yeah. But I mean, to give this movie its due, it is an influential thing among skateboarders. And it does have all of these major skateboarders in it. And that if you were interested in skating culture and you wanted to see Tony Hawk or whatever, this is a movie that you would want to watch.
And I think that was part of what was so much fun about the 80s, the 90s too, is like you could see these movies about subcultures. Some were more effective than others, shall we say.
Yeah.
Like, to me, like The Mighty Ducks is a great movie about like hockey, but, and kids, teenagers playing it. But it's fun to explore all these like kind of weird subcultures, and Gleaming the Cube decided not really to do it.
Right. I mean, it's a good example of that idea that Hollywood producers still do, where they kind of grab onto something that teenagers are doing and they don't really understand it, and they try to fit it into a movie formula.
Yeah. We gotta save the school by all doing TikTok videos.
Right. When is the TikTok movie coming? I'm sure it'll be about as relevant as Gleaming the Cube.
But it might not become a cult classic.
It might not, sadly. As we talked about kind of briefly, this is a big launch, or part of the big launching pad for Christian Slater as this teen rebel icon, the James Dean of his day or something like that. I mean, he did become a big star and a big teen idol, even if this movie wasn't huge.
Yeah. But other than Heathers, do you have a favorite Christian Slater movie or performance? True
Oh,
Romance, I guess.
yeah, I haven't seen True Romance in a long time, but I think Christian Slater, like obviously I love Heathers. I do think Christian Slater is a bit of a one-dimensional actor, and maybe only now with things
He's
like
showing
Mr.
more,
Robot,
yeah,
he's
now.
trying to really branch out. But I mean, he also had this brief kind of teen idol moment, and then he had a long lull of doing bad like straight to
Action
video
movies,
movies and
yeah.
stuff like that. I remember seeing him in some Stephen King movie called Dolan's Cadillac that's just dreadful. And now he seems to be getting more respect in thanks in large part to Mr. Robot. But I mean, I think of, which I actually haven't seen, but like Pump Up the Volume, which is another movie
Ooh,
where he
yeah.
plays like a bad boy teen rebel, and that was all about like a subculture that probably was misunderstood. But I have not seen that movie.
I always wanted to remake that. Like that was always a pitch on my mind of Pump Up the Volume, and now he's like a podcaster who knows all the high school
Yeah.
gossip and everything.
We're just
So-
like Christian Slater and Pump Up the
Do
Volume
you
with our Rebel podcast.
yeah, that's right. Do you have any favorite Christian Slater films, Dave?
Probably just Heathers, honestly.
That's a good pick.
Yeah.
Heather's is good.
Okay, the other question I wanted to ask,
Yes.
as you know, there are a lot of great skate movies out there, both not as many narrative.
Yeah, I think it's mostly documentaries. Did you come up with a good skating narrative movie?
Well, yeah, there is
Okay.
one, but it's not going to be one that you like.
All right.
It's the one you got to watch as like if you want to understand this time and culture, which was the Bones Brigade movie, The Search for Animal Chin, which is like I said, it's
And that's a narrative movie?
yeah,
I haven't heard of that actually.
because it's like a skate video, but it's like one with a plot, and like the Bones Brigade's doing wacky. It probably led to like if Jackass decided to do a narrative movie instead of all pranks. And
Is
well,
that
I mean,
directed by Stacey Peralta?
I think it is.
Yeah.
Well, Back to the Future, does that count as a skate movie? Or?
I mean, I think Back to the Future is not a skate movie, but that's something where they did a better job, where someone probably along the line in development was like, teen skateboard, let's have our teen main character skateboard.
yeah,
But it's not what the movie is about. It's just a thing that he does, and it's kind of like part of his character, and it's not intrusive.
Paranoid Park.
Oh, the Gus Van Sant film?
Yeah,
Which is also a murder mystery, isn't it? I haven't seen it.
I haven't either, but that was I was looking. Like I had mentioned Thrashin', Josh
Right.
Brolin, 1986.
Oh,
so
Josh Brolin, nice.
Dragon Slayer, big stuff there, and then yeah, the documentaries. There's so many good ones.
Yeah.
but, I mean, like Dogtown is to me, Dogtown was one of the great documentaries of all the documentaries ever. Meanwhile, like Lords of Dogtown, which
Right,
had,
the
like,
narrative version.
not that good. Mid 90s, I didn't really like that much.
Mid 90s
That's
is all right.
but-
Yeah, I would give mid 90s a credit, and that's a movie that seems to have a better handle on the actual culture of it.
Yeah, it's all right. And then if we're gonna go back to, we had mentioned Stoked, the Gator movie. I mean, dude, Minding the Gap. That's a great.
Okay, yeah, documentary wise,
Yeah.
Minding the Gap is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's a movie that really delves into the emotional nature of it, like what skateboarding gives to these people in their
Yeah,
difficult lives.
How they gleam the cube, and now that it's their release.
They do. I think it was really restrained on their part to not mention Gleaming the Cube in Minding the Gap.
That's true. The other one I was going to mention is All This Mayhem, about the Australian brothers who are like became skate sensations, and then one also went on to become like a drug addict, murderer. and
No, man, so many murder
Yeah,
documentaries about
yeah,
skaters. Yeah,
yeah.
I haven't seen that one.
It was good.
Yeah. Yes, obviously there's a huge legacy of skateboarding. And because in part two, because skateboarding wasn't just a fad that ended, a year after this movie came out, but became a legitimate sport, and things like the X Games, and isn't even in the Olympics now, skateboarding. Maybe not.
I don't know.
But it's certainly considered legit. I mean, Tony Hawk is a well-respected
yeah.
athlete, not
Well,
just like a weird guy from the 80s.
And a crossover star.
Yeah, yeah.
And Josh, did you have you ever heard of Skate Kitchen? That was like, I think like from last year.
Yeah.
And that's another one that's supposed to really delve deep into the subculture in New York City and what skating means to that area. I've never seen it, but that's one I'm interested in checking
Yeah,
out.
I haven't seen that either, but I had heard a lot about that. And that's about, I think, involves like female skaters and how they deal with it. And there's a narrative TV series version that's coming, or maybe has premiered by the time we're releasing
Well,
this
if it's
episode.
anything as good as Lords of Dogtown, then we're all in good shape.
Yeah, hopefully it's better than that. I did briefly want to again acknowledge that this movie treats Vietnamese culture with respect, and that's important part of its legacy as well.
Yeah.
In a time when every movie that involved representing Vietnamese culture and Vietnamese people was about killing them.
Yeah, other than trying to steal your dead Vietnamese brother's Vietnamese girlfriend, it was very respectful.
I mean, ultimately he was respectful of her. You know, he gave her like a kiss on the cheek at the end of the movie, and that was it.
Yeah, and when she said, "How am I ever going to go back to school?" He's like, "When I get out of the hospital, we'll go together."
Yeah, and he holds her hand, and
yeah,
and he did kill her dad, or cause her
No,
dad
he
to get
didn't.
killed.
He didn't.
No, the George Costanza's
Yeah.
boss did, but
Yeah.
it was really his meddling that kind of got her dad killed.
Well, I told you, Brian, like you got to chill out a little, man. You can't just be a skateboarding cube gleaner forever, man. So
That's Stephen Bauer?
I guess I don't really know anymore.
Well, I guess on that note, we can end. That's Gleaming the Cube, and that's this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Skate on to our social media.
Boom. Do an ollie over to Jason Harris Comedy on Facebook and Instagram, or J Harris Comedy on the Twitter. Go for jason.com. Beautiful website. You'll see it one day. And then Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. AwesomeMovieYear.com. That's up and running.
Yeah, it's working. You can find me at joshbellhateseverything.com. Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
You can find Piecing It Together wherever you listen to this podcast, and find us on social media at Piecing Pod.
What are we doing next time, Jason?
Oh, Josh, you know we love our listeners, don't you?
I do know that.
Do
Yes.
you love them,
I
Josh?
love them so much.
I love them all, Josh.
all two of them.
There's way more than that, Josh. You might not know this, but Dave and I looked it up. We were the 48th ranked film history podcast in the United States not too long ago.
That is such an accomplishment. We gleamed the cube on that so hard.
Anyway, we have our yearly, seasonally audience choice. And for season 3, we decided to do big sequels because there were so many big sequels.
This was like a blockbuster bonanza year.
Huge, man. And the winner was Lethal Weapon 2. So we're going to talk about
Lethal Weapon 2?
Lethal Weapon 2!
So tune in next time for Lethal Weapon 2. Thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
And all points west.